Hey everyone, it's Hailey, and today I just wanted to talk about some books that I have read recently. So I actually have read quite a bit since my last update, so I'm either going to be talking about all 5 of these books. Actually, this is 6, counting's hard. So I'll either be talking about all 6 of them or I will save one for next time. I'm not exactly sure yet. We'll see how the video goes. But as per usual, these are going to be spoiler-free thoughts, so don't worry if you haven't read any of these books. And I will also have timestamps in the description box down below, so in case you wanted to skip to a certain book, then you can do just that. But without further ado, let's just get into it. So the first book that I have read since the last time I did this video, I don't know why that sentence is so complicated, but that would be Cytonic by Sanderson. I enjoyed this book, but it's definitely not my favorite of the Skyward trilogy. Or actually, I think it's the 4th book is going to be the final book. But I'm not going to be spoiling any of the series so far, so don't worry about it. I will keep things vague. I would still say that the second book might be my favorite, just because in the second book the world exploded so much. And I know that a lot of people didn't like that because a lot of characters and relationships and build up that you had in the first book, it was just kind of set to the side because you were in a completely different setting dealing with completely different things. And I can understand why people wouldn't like that, but personally I really enjoyed that. And in this case, the world was expanded even further, but I kind of thought that we were going to go back to the characters that we had in the first book, but that wasn't really the case. So I feel like now it's been too long and I'm vaguely disappointed by that. I don't want to say that I didn't like this book because that's not true. I still love the characters. Like, there are so many characters that I just fell in love with, and this manages to be a really adventurous and action-packed story while also having so many funny moments. So it really balances that very well. And although there are some like complicated sci-fi things going on, or at least for me because I don't generally like sci-fi, I think the series does a great job of dealing with that. That being said though, I did find that this one dragged a little bit and I was kind of bored, even though it was action-packed, if that makes sense. I think that this book just kind of seemed like a filler book or a bridge book, and I just don't really like that. You were introduced to even more characters and there was more things to keep track of, so like by the time the 4th book comes out, I'm kind of going to be like, do I really care about these characters anymore? Because I'm assuming that the characters from the 1st book are going to come back in the 4th book, and I just don't really remember them. So I just think it's an interesting way to do the series. I don't know, like I do really enjoy these books, and Spencer with her shoulder length hair on the cover. I say that because in the 2nd book they clearly say that her hair goes to her shoulders, yet on all of the covers, like this one isn't as bad, but the cover for the 2nd book literally is just like her hair is the entire thing. So I'm like, is that really shoulder length? I don't know, but it's fine. Like, I'm sure that the cover designer didn't have that good of a description of her when they were drawing the cover. The covers still are beautiful. But yeah, my point is, this was fine. Like, not definitely my least favorite of the series, but I do still really love this series. So I did still enjoy it. It just was a little bit of a letdown compared to, what is the 2nd one? Starsight. So after that, I read The Shadows Between Us by Tricia Levenseller. I really liked this book actually. So Tricia Levenseller is kind of my go-to for fast, steamy romances, whatever they might be. And I mean, they're not always like, there are a lot of them where the romance is a storyline, but there's also more. Like, I'm thinking of Blade of Secrets by Tricia Levenseller, which has a great sisterhood storyline that I really appreciated. But for the most part, like Daughter of the Pirate King and this one definitely focus on that steamy romance, but I've really enjoyed the steamy romance. So I was expecting this. Apparently it's described as like a Slytherin romance, and that's really what it is. The main character, she is very power hungry. She's really driven. So she's planning on wooing the Shadow King in order to kill him and then take his throne for herself. But as she gets to know him more, obviously that becomes kind of more complicated. So it definitely is. I see where people would not like this because she does very quickly kind of change her tune, but it did still also make for like a really steamy, lots of tension, slow burn romance. Essentially, it's kind of fake dating in a fantasy setting because it's a mutual agreement between the two of them, so that was something that I hadn't seen done before. And that was kind of the plot line, was the fake dating thing and the romance. There really wasn't that much of a plot line aside from that. Like, it definitely didn't have the highest of stakes, but it was just a lot of fun. I felt like the angst drove that chemistry between the characters. Like, I definitely believed their relationship, and maybe it's just because there was so much tension and it was kind of like a will they, won't they can't, like that sort of thing. That always seems to get me, so that was definitely the case here. But I don't know, I just felt like this was a different twist on the typical fantastical romance that I read, so I really liked that it did that. It was really quick, fast-paced, and a lot of fun to read at the same time. So I think that this book did exactly what I wanted it to, so I did really like it. After that, I read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Actually, I listened to the audiobook for this one, and this is a book that has been super hyped up on TikTok. And I think this is kind of a hard one to review because it's a really personal book. It's kind of part self-help book, but part a fictional story. And I can see why people might not like this one, but for me, I think it was a matter of like reading it at the right time, and it was something that spoke to me. Like, it's no mystery, I've told you guys a million times that I've had so many struggles with my mental health, especially in the past couple of years, and this book deals with that. And you have a character who is caught in this library between life and death, where the library is filled with books that show all of the different lives that you could have lived. They have all the different decisions you could have made and what would have happened then. So I didn't actually realize what like was the catalyst for the story, but that kind of like spoke to me even more, I guess, because it was really powerful. And Matt Haig does write self-help books, so like I'm not surprised that this kind of took a turn like that. But like I said, I think this is definitely a super personal read. I think it's going to be a book that you'll either take from it what you need and move along, or you'll take from it what you need and really love it and move along, or you'll be kind of annoyed at the preachiness of it. But I found that it was super effective in its message, and it managed to perfectly blend that storytelling aspect with the message that it wanted to get across. It's kind of like a parable, if you will, because it's showing her, like, it's a little bit like Goldilocks. You have the main character, she's so unhappy with her life that she ends up going and trying out all these different ones, trying to find one that works for her so then she can get out of the midnight library. But you see her kind of contemplating all of the regrets in her life, and it's very reflective. Like, I don't think I've ever read a book like this before, which is why it spoke to me so much. I've never read something that is part self-help and part fiction. It was just such a fascinating experience, and I think the author did a great job with it. I felt so much sympathy for the main character, and I was able to easily put myself in her shoes and be on this journey with her. And like, so many moments, I feel like this is probably a book that I will reread. It's definitely a very rereadable book because I feel like it's one that I could definitely go through and like highlight things that speak to me. But yeah, I just found it to be amazing, and I think that for me it lived up to the hype personally, but I can totally see why some people wouldn't enjoy this one. I just think that it was exactly what I needed at the time when I read it. Next, I read You Can Go Your Own Way by Eric Smith. I decided to read this book because it's set during a blizzard. It follows two characters who they used to be friends, now they're not, and the one character, his father passed away last year, so he's struggling with the grief of that, and they own this pinball cafe or arcade where it's like the last piece that he has of his father. Meanwhile, the other character is the daughter of this guy who owns these internet cafes that want to buy out the pinball arcade and turn it into one of the lifeless gaming cafes, as he calls them. So the two of them have kind of been on rocky ground since then, and they are forced together through this blizzard. This was kind of disappointing. This is by the author of Don't Read the Comments, which I really liked. But this one just let me down a little bit because it focused like the blizzard doesn't come until so far into the book. And that's what the synopsis is. Like the synopsis makes you think that like, oh, they get stuck in this blizzard. So like there's this huge snowstorm that hits, they're stuck together and blah, blah, blah. But so much of the lead up to it was just kind of meandering around. And I understand building up the background, getting a feel for how the characters are interacting outside of this forced proximity situation, how they live their lives, like painting the picture, basically setting the scene. But it just was a lot of nothing. I think ultimately the pacing was off, which is one of my pet peeves when it comes to books. I don't like when the pacing is off, and that's definitely what this one had. Like, I didn't not like this one. I was just kind of let down, and I just think it was average. There's nothing that really wowed me about it. I think the chemistry between the two characters, as they have this kind of enemies to lovers, second chance romance sort of thing, was meh. And well, it took so long for things to get going. Once they did, it like took off like a rocket. Like everything was happening too quickly. This is also definitely just like a personal preference thing, but there's like this business social media thing where the businesses are interacting with each other, and it was kind of cringy for me. I don't know what platform they were on, but they were like talking to each other and they were arguing with each other through the thing, and then other businesses would chime in and be like, oh, are you meaning people to see this? It was just very strange that like other people could see this rivalry. I don't know. I think this, like, it was trying in that way to do what Tweet Cute did, but I think Tweet Cute did it a lot better. However, I did enjoy like the actual environment of the small businesses, and the setting and everything I think was really well done. It's somewhere that I've never been, but I felt like I could picture it. And also the addition of pinball was super cool. Like, it definitely is prominent in the storyline. However, I wish that the main character, I don't even remember his name, Adam, I wish that Adam had been developed outside of his love of pinball, because it kind of fell into the thing where he had like two personality traits. The one was that he's grieving his father, which is understandable, but the other thing is that he loves pinball, and that was pretty much all that you got to know about him. So I just wish that the characters could have been a little more multi-dimensional. But I mean, their relationship, as much as the chemistry was meh, their friendship I liked, and I just felt like it was fine. Like, I don't regret having read this one, but it's kind of one that I feel like I'll soon forget. After that, conversely, I read a book that I definitely won't soon forget, and that is You've Reached Sam by Dustin Thao. So I had seen this book around, and I already had pre-ordered it. I mean, this cover is absolutely stunning, but I didn't have expectations going into it, I don't think. If anything, I thought maybe it was going to be corny and I wouldn't really like it. But I did read a book, and it's called I Heart You, You Haunt Me. I'll put a picture of the cover on the screen. I think it was one of those MTV books like way back in the day, in the early 2000s or something like that. Maybe late 2000s, I don't know. But basically, I read that book before I even really liked reading books. And that follows kind of a similar storyline where we have a character and she's interacting with her dead boyfriend. And I really liked that book when I read it, so this definitely gave me the same vibes as that. In this case, however, the main character, she calls her boyfriend because she has been really struggling since he's died. And she calls just to hear his voicemail, just to hear his voice one last time, but he ends up actually picking up. So they are able to connect for a limited period of time. They're able to keep on calling and interacting with each other so she can say her final goodbyes. This is like as heartbreaking as it sounds, honestly, and I think it was a really realistic portrayal of grief, because you see, it's hard to read because you see the other people around her who are so hurt, and she's just kind of shutting everyone out. She's really being intrinsic about the whole thing, and everyone deals with grief in their own way. And that's partially what makes it so hard to read, is that she's suffering alone and hurting others in the process, but that's just kind of how she's dealing with things. Meanwhile, she has this limited connection with him that like makes it so she has to explore the grief that she's been avoiding almost. It just like, it hit me. It hit me so so hard. I wasn't expecting, it's definitely a very intense love story. And for them being teenagers and not knowing each other for really that long, it read so intensely. And I think if it were any situation other than him having died, this sounds horrible, but I would have been kind of annoyed with it. But you could just like feel the chemistry and the passion in their love story. And I think because he had died, that's why it just felt like so heartbreaking and heart-wrenching. This is told alternating between like her on the phone saying her final goodbyes to him after he's died and actually their relationship before anything has happened. So you got a really well-rounded picture of the beginning to the end, and it just broke your heart, but like it was beautiful. I just felt like this was a really unique take on grief. I think that the main character was kind of unlikable, which was very interesting, but I was still able to feel very sympathetic for her and was rooting for her the entire time. Like, it was super well done. All the emotion that it had and everything. I am shocked that this is a debut. Like, I can't wait to see what else the author is going to come out with. And I will talk about the final book that I've read lately. And unfortunately, this is actually one that I DNF'd, which I'm really sad about. But that is For All Time by Shanna Miles. I wanted to love this book. I really, really did. But unfortunately, it just did not work for me. So this was kind of obviously like I decided to go for kind of sad reads for Valentine's Day this year. I don't know why. But this book is about two characters who they have had this love story like throughout time. Different lifetimes, they always meet each other and fall in love, and then they're trying to put a stop to it. So I felt like straight from the beginning, I was really confused. I felt like the writing was kind of clunky, and that made it hard to almost keep track of what was happening and where the story was going. So I think I got like, I want to say 65% of the way through, and I just still felt like I didn't really have a feel for what was going on. I didn't really have a footing within the story, and because I didn't really understand the plot so much or the characters, I just didn't feel like I could continue. I did start physically reading this and then ended up moving on to the audiobook, and I was enjoying the audiobook more because I felt like it did a little bit allow me to get more immersed in the story, but I still felt super disconnected from all of it. And unfortunately, I think this is a story where you do really need to have that strong connection with the characters, but I didn't feel like I got to know them before you were bouncing around time and everything, and it just was really jarring for that reason. I am really sad that this one didn't work out for me, and I hope that other people have really enjoyed it because I think the concept is amazing. It's super cool, but for me, the execution just didn't work, and I really am heartbroken about it, but I tried. Okay, so those are 6 of the books that I have read most recently. So if you have read these books, please let me know your thoughts on them because I would love to know. And thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another one soon. Bye!